The first thing the human heard was her voice breaking in the dark cell beneath the ruined palace, soft and trembling, asking if something was wrong with her because he had not mated her since she was gifted. And the question struck him harder than any weapon because it carried confusion, shame, and quiet despair instead of anger. And he realized that in a universe shaped by war, this broken alien believed rejection was worse than death. She had once been called Sarai of the Lumen Tide, born beneath blue stars, raised to believe that when her people lost a war and offered a living gift to the victor, it was not cruelty but destiny, a binding meant to ensure survival. And when the human empire crushed her world, the elders wrapped her in silver cloth, whispered prayers, and sent her away as an offering to a species they feared yet hoped would be merciful. The human who received her was Captain Elias Ward, a soldier already hollowed by years of command, a man who had watched friends die and cities burn in the name of peace. And when she was delivered to him like an object, he felt only disgust and sorrow, not desire. And he ordered her quarters sealed, guards posted, and distance maintained, believing restraint was the last good thing he could offer in a bad war. Sarai waited. Days passed, weeks passed. No touch came, no claiming ritual, no bond. Whispers followed her through the ship. Human soldiers looked at her with curiosity or fear. Alien prisoners looked at her with hatred, calling her cursed, unfinished, a failed offering whose existence angered fate itself. When the human fleet withdrew after a sudden counterattack, Sarai was left behind during the evacuation, marked as non-essential, a line in a report that said asset lost, and she hid in the ruins of her own city as both alien hunters and human patrols swept the streets, each side seeing her as a mistake that needed to be erased. Hunger weakened her, fear hollowed her, yet the thought that hurt most was not abandonment, but the belief that she had failed at the one thing her life was meant to do. When she was finally captured by human soldiers weeks later, wounded and shaking, she did not beg for mercy or freedom, but asked to see Captain Ward, believing that if he rejected her again, she would finally understand her worth. They brought her to him in chains as alarms blared, enemy ships descending, the city collapsing into chaos. And when she looked up at him, her eyes were not angry but broken, and she asked her question again, quietly asking what was wrong with her, why he never claimed her, why she was left untouched and then abandoned. Elias felt the weight of every order he had ever followed crush down on him, as he looked at the bruises on her skin and the fear she tried to hide. And he tried to explain that humans did not take gifts like that consent mattered, that choice mattered. But the words sounded empty in a universe that had taught her obedience was love. Before he could say more, explosions tore through the hall as an alien purge squad breached the palace, intent on killing Sarai to cleanse the shame of her survival. And in the confusion, a blade meant for Elias pierced her side as she stepped in front of him without hesitation, fulfilling the duty she believed defined her existence. Blood spilled. She collapsed. Elias caught her, shouting for medics who never came, because both sides were too busy killing each other to care about one dying alien girl and one disobedient human officer. As he pressed his hands to her wound, she whispered that her people had lied, that the bond was never supposed to be forced. That ancient text spoke of a choice freely made, but those words were buried because fear was easier to rule with than truth. And she admitted that she had hoped humans were different, that his refusal had confused her but also given her hope, even as it destroyed her place in the world. Something inside Elias broke then, not loudly, but completely, and he made a decision that would end his career and maybe his life. He lifted her into his arms and ran through fire and falling stone, ignoring orders, ignoring shouts of treason. As human soldiers turned their weapons on him and alien hunters chased them through the ruins, united only in their desire to erase what did not fit their rules, he reached the central plaza where ancient alien symbols lay buried beneath rubble. And with no other choice, he stood there and declared, not to any council or army, but to the universe itself, that Sarai was under his protection, not as property, not as a prize, but as a person who chose and was chosen in return. When the first blast hit him, he thought it was over, but instead of death, light poured from the ground, responding to intent rather than bloodline. to defiance rather than dominance, and the symbols awakened, wrapping them both in energy that stunned every soldier present. Alien commanders froze in terror. Human officers lowered their weapons in disbelief. The bond had formed not through ritual or ownership, but through sacrifice and choice, unlocking an ancient system meant to protect those who refused to become monsters. When the light faded, Sarai was alive, changed, her wounds healed, her eyes clear for the first time, and Elias stood beside her, stripped of rank, surrounded by silence where war once screamed. In the days that followed, both empires tried to bury what happened, calling it an anomaly, a malfunction, a myth. But stories spread anyway, whispered by soldiers who saw a human choose compassion over victory and survive, and an alien who lived because someone finally said no. Sarai learned that her worth was not defined by being claimed, and Elias learned that being human meant accepting the cost of doing what was right, even when the world punished you for it. Together they walked away from the ruins, into exile, into uncertainty, carrying no banners and no chains, only the quiet understanding that survival without dignity was not living, and that hope, once chosen, could defy even the cruelest destiny. And somewhere in the rebuilding worlds, others began to question the rules they had never dared to challenge, because one broken alien and one tired human proved that the universe could change. When someone refused to look away,